I hope you're all doing well. Today I'd like to give a little update on who benefits from war. Now firstly, I don't want to be insensitive to any of the challenges that are going on right now. War is always bad. My videos have always been about sharing peace, love, unity, and reporting on the financial affairs that allow us to protect ourselves as individuals from the actions of politicians and political leaders and geopolitics. So for over 2 decades, I've been doing that. And in this video, I'd like to share with you a little approach that I've always used because people have always asked me, Simon, how do you forecast these things? And my answer is follow the money, follow the narrative. So when I'm looking at an event like this, beyond the emotional trauma of seeing people suffering both their living, their basic human rights and ability to live in freedom, as well as their destroying their financial affairs that takes away any power or freedom they had to counter these acts that are so destructive and horrible for so many people. Then I always say, but I always look at following the money and following the narrative. Where did I get this from? So about 2 decades ago, when I was working as a stockbroker in a company called TD Waterhouse, one of the largest stockbrokers in Canada, in the UK. And we were looking at the accounts after 9/11. And the accounts that were blacklisted, as it were, or pending further investigation, were all the accounts that had significant financial gains out of positions that they placed prior to 9/11. And the financial accounts that had unusual activities that benefited significantly from 9/11 were the ones that had to go under huge investigation. And eventually those following the money is what led to the events that followed. So I learned that at a very early age in my very first career in the financial markets. About a decade ago, I released a video called The Great Depression of the 2020s. And if you look at that video, it was me presenting over 13 years ago, I think. I uploaded it in 2010, 11, I can't quite remember. And it was from a presentation I gave in 2009 where I was sharing the flows of money that will lead to disaster after disaster because of the structure of our financial system, because governments have outsourced the money creation process to the private banking sector, and therefore we have more debt than money, and so you will exponentially increase individual, corporate, government, and then eventually that ends up on the balance sheet of the central bank, which will then have to implement a monetary policy that deleverages the economy, but at the same time has a huge impact on our freedoms, our privacy, and various other things. And so what I'm always doing when I'm looking at these events that don't quite make sense to people is I'm trying to follow the money, then follow the narrative. And then people ask me, why did you believe in Bitcoin when in 2011, the very first Bitcoin conference I spoke at, wrote the first published book in the world to believe in Bitcoin? Well, follow the money, follow the narrative. I was forecasting based upon the narratives, based upon my understanding of the financial system, that money you can own, money you can spend, and money that had a fixed supply would only lead to increased demands in the future if it could get traction because there's a fixed supply. So are governments or are the leaders of the world likely to wage war on you having the ability to own your own money? The answer is yes. They will have a war on cash, and I forecasted very early a war on banks as well, as they are operating off a Ponzi scheme called fiat currency, where they create money every time they issue a loan, and therefore you need to deleverage, and therefore the ability to own your own money would be a counter trend. Would there be censorship on how you spend your money? Well, I was forecasting that the censorship on financial transactions as a result of the world's largest regulated Ponzi scheme And having banks create money every time they issue a loan means that the government would want something from the banks and they would use them in order to enforce tax collection, anti-money laundering, in order to assist in their law enforcement. And therefore the user experience of money would get worse and worse and worse over time. Would there be benefit in having a fixed money supply? Well, yes, the forecast was that the money supply would always have to increase because money is debt, there's more debt than money, therefore follow the money, you'd have to rehypothecate, and therefore there's only one result of this. You have to print more and more money in order to service the debt because it is by definition a Ponzi scheme, or you have to find a way of deleveraging, which is the central bank digital currency. So let's get into the main topic. Who benefits from the war? Well, follow the money, follow the narrative. So the first is the central bank. So the wars are funded by central banks. Central banks were created in order to fund wars, and that's the origin of what they do. Now, their job has always been reported. The narrative is that they need to create stability in financial markets. They need to control inflation and deflation. And they need to be involved in some kind of regulation and competition narrative around creating a robust, stable financial markets. How are they done? The worst track record in history. If that was your job, they've created more boom and bust, they've created more intervention, they've created less stability, they've created the world's largest regulated Ponzi scheme, and they're going to be depicted as the saviors of it all when they launch their central bank digital currencies through a fiscal and monetary union that deleverages all the debt that was created as a result of propping up the world's largest regulated Ponzi scheme rather than allowing markets to prevail. So simply follow the money, follow the narrative. The narrative is that we need to make more stability. The money says that we don't create more stability because the system is set up to fail. Then how do you create more stability? So you fund wars, which is an easy narrative to sell. We need to defend ourselves, an easy narrative. And what is the next thing that comes from funding wars, so launching weapons of mass destruction, is that you combat it in a peaceful way through financial weapons of mass destruction. And by peaceful, I mean destroy the lives of people's savings, destroy everything that they've always worked for, increase the censorship in money on innocent people as a result of the actions of leaders, bad people, and people that got on the right side of the financial system. And so you can see the absolute financial destruction that is being caused as a result of central banks' policies. You've got hyperinflation in some countries. You've got sanctions in other countries. You've got currency wars globally. And so the goal of the narrative is completely failed. So firstly, you fund a war, then you implement financial weapons of mass destruction through sanctions. Then what do? Well, you come in as the savior, the hero that's going to launch a central bank digital currency because what have you done? You've created a complete war on the banks. The banks were given by government outsourcing the ability to create money every time they issue a loan. That is a Ponzi scheme. Fund wars, implement sanctions, and then you destroy the banking system altogether. Now, do we want people to lose their money? Well, certain countries, we're going to say, well, they're the evil banking system. And that evil banking system, they're all going to lose their money. They're going to have bail-ins, or they're going to use their central bank and they're going to hyperinflate their people away, and they'll be portrayed as the evil countries. The good countries are going to go out and they're going to launch central bank digital currencies. They're going to say, don't worry, your bank's gone bust, but sign up to this app. And when you sign up to this app, whatever you had in that evil bank, you're going to have it in this new application. So if you had $10,000 there, you now have $10,000 here. The banking system, the Ponzi scheme that was created by the central banks, where the government's outsourced ability to create money as debt, self-destructs as a result of war funding, sanctions. And then the result is that we launch a new currency that's not backed by debt, that's more sustainable because of the fact that it's not backed by debt and is not a Ponzi scheme. But every time you opt in, you opt out of your freedoms, you opt out of your privacies, you opt out of your right to own your own money, your right to spend your own money. And guess what? We're going to create it whenever we choose based upon the goals of the fiscal and monetary union, i.e. the separation between monetary policy and how governments decide to spend that money. That's called artificial intelligence. That's called negative interest rates. That's called automated tax collection. That's called taking a percentage in order to spend on giving injections to everybody, if that's the narrative, or giving the ability for everyone to defend themselves in a time where we have these leaders that are invading each other. So it's worth it. Tick the terms and conditions, and here's your central bank digital currency, and we'll build a financial technology revolution on top of technology that exists on top of the central bank digital currency. Happy days. Oil companies. Does it make sense that there would be, we are told that there's war everywhere. There's been war at places all around the world, and there's certain wars that we're told we don't need to give a shit about. And there's other wars that completely control the narrative of our television. Now, this is not me saying that undermining any of the destructive and the complete suffering that our leaders have put people through as a result of raging these wars. But I also think it's very questionable why there's been wars in certain countries that we're told we really don't need to care about, and there's others that have completely taken what we were told is the most important thing. Prior to this, we had a death counter in the corner of our TV counting down how many people were dying as a result of us not injecting ourselves, and having, the largest sell strategy I have ever seen in why you should inject yourself once, oh, by the way, that leads to, there's still problems there. Inject yourself twice, oh, there's still problems there. Inject yourself 3 times, oh, there's still problems there. Inject yourself 4 times, oh, there's still problems there. And I'm not sure we can sell the 5th one. So instead, all of a sudden, we're not counting the number of people that are dying as a result of not injecting themselves. We're counting the number of people that are dying as a result of this evil invasion. And don't get me wrong, it is completely evil. War is completely destructive, but it wouldn't be possible, or it would be possible to a much less extent, if it was funded by digital hard sound money, where there was more transparency in the financial system. People could own their own money, and therefore they could spend their own money, and the flow in which they move their funds is a function of more transparency in the system rather than less transparency in the system. And my guess is that if you voted with your money, then less wars would be funded. And if you decided that you wanted to use your money in order to fund wars, it would be based upon individual decisions that reflected the values of society, which is what I talked about over a decade ago when I wrote the book, Bank to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust. That if you add more transparency to the monetary system, if you add it in a way that protects people's privacies, but creates immutable records, when I saw the design of Bitcoin, then you change the relationship that people have with their money to a much, much, much direct way, rather than having these sweeping sanctions that completely destruct innocent people's lives, savings, and ability to work their way out of poverty as a result of trying to punish the few people that are making decisions that are so destructive on the masses and individuals that have no say or no control over the financial system whatsoever. Now, does it make sense that if there is a ginormous oil industry between one of the largest producers, Russia, and a country that has a very large foreign policy of putting defense spending and defense foreign policies on certain countries, and they are part of an organization or a group called NATO, i.e. the US, does it make sense that there might be military spending excessively being spent on that country that has more control over oil supplies than, and there also might be a very want and desire and need to defend what happens to that country, and therefore the people that live in there get caught in the middle of geopolitics, get their complete freedoms, their basic human rights destructed and taken away from them, that only leads to people creating more hate crime and all sorts of stuff that happens as a result of this. And does it not make sense that Bretton Woods 2 will become the end result of this, pushing the central bank digital currency agenda to save the system after funding wars and implementing ginormous sanctions across countries that destroyed and made so many people angry? Weapons of mass destruction being combated by financial weapons of mass destruction equals more and more harm to more and more people. And that's the cold, hard reality of the situation. So follow the money. Why are we told that we should care more about the destruction that's happening in one country? Well, there's more oil involved in that one. And the narrative changes from the US coming out of Afghanistan or something like that, and some of the ignoring Israeli-Palestine conflict and all the other things that are happening in this world, that we don't get global attention where we have a death counter on the corner of our TV around how many people are dying, unless it's serving a certain narrative around something that will come next. And so the end result of this is that you get oil prices that during the peak of the pandemic are negative oil prices to record high prices. Follow the money. Who's going to benefit from that? You just got to follow the money, follow the narrative. So all of a sudden, negative oil prices to record high oil prices as a result of conflict. At the end of the conflict, we end up in Bretton Woods 2, where we renegotiate the monetary system, just like I forecasted in the Great Depression of the 2020s videos. And I was warning everybody prior to the pandemic or during the pandemic in my Retirement Plan B video series. Watch it here. Is why I did emergency broadcasts when IMF was calling out for Bretton Woods 2. It's why the narrative of the 10 years ago I was able to talk about modern monetary theory in Bank to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust, is just simply following the money, following the narrative. Who else benefits? Well, obviously we're going to have a ginormous increase in defense spending. We've already had the announcements. We must go Germany. We must go from 1% to 3%. So now we're creating money in order to fund much, much more defense based upon the narrative that we no longer need to count the number of people that are dying as a result of us not injecting ourselves, but now we need to count the number of people that are dying as a result of these geopolitical, and we need to pick the wars that get everyone's attention. Follow the money, follow the narrative. Central banks, oil companies, defense spending, follow those monies, follow the narrative. And then people tell me that by sharing people the need for Bitcoin, because been trying to tell and shout for as loud as I can that money that you can own, money you can spend, and money has a fixed supply is not a Ponzi scheme, is not just a get-rich-quick scheme, is not something that you should use in order to take your fiat money and try and convert it to Bitcoin so you can trade it in and out, pay more tax to the system because you're trading in and out, and see it as a mechanism for accumulating more fiat. And that you should be a Bitcoin thinker and seeing fiat as a mechanism for accumulating more Bitcoin and leaving all the traders to do their crazy things. And then people pushing the narrative, this is a currency just for drug dealers, it's a Ponzi scheme, it's a scam. And that created, 69 million% returns for the people that could follow the money, follow the narrative. I'm not saying that's going to happen again, but you just got to simply follow the money, follow the narrative. I don't want this to come across as any kind of conspiracy theories. You could look at it in two ways. Either events are engineered in order to benefit financially, or financial markets predict things greater en masse than the events that follow. Either way, pick your narrative. I don't really care. All I know is that if you follow the money, follow the narrative, the most important thing is you protecting yourself from geopolitics. And any movements towards making protests illegal and financial censorship for people, bringing exposure and spotlight to the key issues that the traditional media says that we're not, it doesn't get the airtime. And now we need to change the death counter towards some other agenda and some other strategy. Shame on anybody that implements such things and packages up in the aim of, we need to protect our people. If you really wanted to protect your people, you do exactly what type of financial innovation you're seeing in countries like El Salvador. Building an economy based upon agendas to try and inject more freedom, and taking away the need for central banks. So who's going to benefit from all this in the end? Whoever takes the funding in order to take the defense spending, the way in which that gets funded. If it's funded by International Monetary Fund loans, then that's simply the perpetuation of the Ponzi scheme at the multinational global organization level. And Bretton Woods 2 will be the renegotiation of our monetary system. And I said the people that will have a seat at the table will be the people that have the largest gold to GDP ratios, because they have the most influence as a result of digital hard sound money. And those that have the right Bitcoin policies, I forecast, will also have a seat at the table, because they will have digital hard sound money. And that will create global currency wars of governments, agendas, and central bank digital currencies and other financial weapons of mass destructions that I've tried to cover. But follow the money, follow the narrative. The markets tend to always predict what comes next. And that is because some people know, some people make financial decisions based upon either their forecast about what's coming or the fact or knowing of what's coming. And I was taught 20 years ago that that's how you forecast political events. And 10 years ago, I used it to try and protect people when I wrote the book, Bank to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust. And my message to you is to take care of your personal finances, because when you get caught in the middle of geopolitics, you need to be prepared for inflation, deflation, economic growth, economic decline, sanctions, bank failure, bank seizures, financial crisis, the removal of privacies and freedoms through central bank digital currencies, and everything that follows from that. I created a completely free membership portal for anyone. I benefit not financially from this, but if anyone wants a free digital copy of my book, Bank to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust, go to retirementplanb.com/book. I also added there all of the emergency broadcasts that lead to many of these things that I'm talking about, the 4-part video series for free on how to build and protect your wealth, where I was sharing exactly how I invest during these markets, and about 12 hours of masterclasses for those that really want to dig deep and understand the subject. I personally believe that no matter what happens, this is either the worst moment or best moment for you. And the only thing I know how to do is shine a spotlight on some of the injustices that are happening in this world and give commentary on the financial impact so that you can protect yourself, so that when you protect yourself, you get yourself on the right side of this change. in all of this negativity, in all of this destruction, I've got to believe my deluded belief that as a result of these horrific war crimes that we're experiencing right now, both through financial weapons of mass destruction and normal weapons of mass destruction that people are more familiar with, i.e. dropping bombs on each other, that this needs to shine a spotlight on more of the cancerous effects that are in our lives right now, in both the financial system, and shine a spotlight on the fact that what we are being told we need to focus on in the media right now is happening in lots of countries. And it's happening a lot worse. And it's happening to people that don't necessarily have oil or populations dominated by people with white skin. And that there are lots of other things in this world that we need to focus on. And if it draws more consciousness onto some of the things that we should also be looking at, then the only way I can make sense out of such horror and destruction is that the narrative, the awareness, draws more attention to things that we should be looking at, having influence upon, shining a spotlight upon. And if people are experiencing the poverty and destruction of war and sanctions right now, that they could develop more empathy for some of the other really destructive things that are happening in the world that you might be able to make a little bit of difference in. And the first thing is building and protecting your own wealth so that you have more freedom and powers to influence the things that you might be able to have some influence over as well. And if we get more education out of this about understanding that desire and need financial education to really look at the subject, follow the money, follow the narrative, then there has to be something good that can come from these events that happen. One of the most beautiful things that came from Bitcoin, I was trying to explain how banks create money, banks own your own money. I was trying to explain that to people for so long. I was chucked out. I remember London School of Economics literally wanted to chuck me out for explaining exactly how banks work. And they disagreed on the multiplier effect and various other things in economic debates that we were having at the time. I was actually turfed out at the university, but now, thanks to Bitcoin, the narrative, the education that's come from that around so many people understanding the monetary system, as a result of just giving people the ability to own their own money, spend their own money, and have a fixed supply, learning how it contrasts from the alternative. And so my only way of making sense of this is that there has to be something good that comes from this in a world where our leaders are causing so much poverty and destruction for so many, using both weapons of mass destruction and financial weapons of mass destruction. So with that in mind, you are alive at one of the most interesting and exciting times in financial history. Those that don't know about it and that are on the wrong side of financial change, I really hope that somebody likes, shares, gives this video to you, or just gives you a video from somebody else that's making a difference that you can relate more to, rather than me, just this geeky financial geek British guy that may be dry toast and doesn't have the charisma of other people. But if this relates to you, then I believe more and more people need to build and protect their wealth so that they can stand aside as a commentator, have more freedoms, have more abilities to affect change, or have just more options for those and the ones that they love. If you're on the right side of financial change, as I said, it gives you those options. And my mission in all of these videos is to just try and give you a little bit more understanding about the financial system so that you might be able to make better decisions, so that you can protect yourself in a time when our leaders are doing things that are completely destructive, and maybe completely against our individual agendas as a result of those countries' agendas and the egos that arise as a result of that. And please, if you just do one thing, please do not conflate the acts of leaders with the acts of the population. Please do not allow the subconscious effect of hate that will come from this. please be better than that. Please educate yourself. Please understand empathy for the people that are not making these decisions, that may have been born in the wrong country, and just because of the country that they were born in, or the color of their skin, or the various other things, you create internal prejudice and times of trauma as a result of being involved in actions from leaders that leads to global beliefs that all people of this origin, or all people of this color, or all people that came from this country are bad people. Then they've won. Control the narrative. Understand that this is the actions of a few. Follow the money, educate yourself, and be grateful that we are alive at one of the most interesting and exciting times in financial history. Whatever is happening to you right now, no matter how bad it is, you've got to have a belief that there's something good that can come from this. And we as humans need to create something good from this. And that's my calling to everybody, to find their inner difference that they can make and build and protect their own personal wealth, because your governments and these agendas, if you may be on the wrong side of them, and so you've got to look after yourself. Control the narrative, control your money, so that you can get on the right side of financial change. Peace.